When I was a teenager, I spoke at a public event about a tragedy that had happened in our town. Sadly, the same town where the stabbing has taken place, a different tragedy in Reading. But when I spoke, the MP of our area came up to me and said, I think I'd like to offer you an apprenticeship to come and learn from me. And it felt like at the time I had this choice to pursue politics or perhaps to focus on my serving the church. And I was only a teenager at the time. I had no idea what I was doing, but I said no to the internship and decided to follow ways of serving the church at the time. Not sure it's a decision that my mum has still forgiven me for. She thought it was a great opportunity. But I've been faced with choices throughout my life. In my adult life, I've been faced with choices about work. Do I try and find a career that just pays me lots of money? Or do I go and work in the charity sector? And that wasn't a hard decision for me. That was, charity work all the way. And now, as an adult, I'm a pandemic parent. I've got children at school. And I'm having to make decisions about sending them back to school and who to mix with and all of these sort of things that impact the future and health and life of my children. Faced with choices all the time. Now, one of my things I studied is philosophy at undergraduate level, and one of the problems that was there is the trolley cart problem. Hopefully throughout this talk there are slides that will also be appearing on the screen for you to have a look at. So trolley is the American term for like a cable car or this tracked car monorail thing, and you have a decision. For some reason you are in control of whether this cart hurtling down a street which can't stop goes left or right, and you get to choose. However, on one direction there is one person, and in the other direction there are 5 people. Which do you choose? The majority of people choose to just, one death is not as bad as 5, so we'll let it hurtle towards the one person. But then you tweak the situation a little bit and you go, okay, but what if the 5 had all escaped from prison and the 1 was a baby? Does that change your answer? Does that change the way you see things? What if the 5 were complete strangers but the 1 was your best friend? What would you do? Well, the higher up in philosophy you go, when they did statistics and studies on this, they discovered that professional philosophers were less likely to choose just attacking the one person. It goes down to 70% as opposed to in the 90 percentages for everybody else. And a few people just decide, I'm not going to interfere at all. It will just, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. But I bring this up because we are all faced with choices in our daily lives. We get out of bed and we decide, what are we going to eat for breakfast? We have so many things that we have to think about, and so many moral choices to make as well. Do we buy organic? Do we not? Do we buy ethical, or do we buy affordable? And that will change depending on our own situation and our financial security, perhaps. The bits that are useful to identify as moral dilemmas, as opposed to just choices we make, are the ones that make you go, "Oh, I'm not sure if I should or I shouldn't." I'm not sure feeling. That's a good indicator that it's a moral decision. And I want to focus on our Romans passage today, because I think this has something to say about the way perhaps we help make decisions in our life. Because you can look at what a decision looks like for you, and you can understand what a decision might look like for me or somebody else. But we're in church, right? Is there something different about that? Is there something different about what a God's kingdom decision might look like? Well, I think Romans speaks a lot about that. So, I want to just give a little bit of context to the book of Romans. So when the church was established in Rome, not by Paul, you had Gentiles and Jewish Christians together. So those who were Jewish and those basically everybody else who wasn't. And then you had Emperor Claudius show up and he goes, you know what, I don't like these Jewish people, so I'm going to kick them all out. So all the Jewish Christians had to leave Rome. And then you had this 5 years of the church being Gentile Christians. And then the Jewish people were able to come back in, and the Jewish Christians were there going, oh, hang on, you've changed some stuff. What about circumcision? What about these dietary laws? What about these other things? And there was this conflict between them. And that's the situation that Paul's writing into. And it's a group of people he's not met. So therefore, the letter of Romans is very different to his other ones, because he wants to set everything out. He wants to explain what he's thinking. He wants to explain how salvation works and what the kingdom looks like and all of these different things. And then he sends that letter with Phoebe and sends her off to Rome, a previous slave, entrusted with the letter that teaches about salvation and God's kingdom on earth. And the book of Romans can be split up into 4 different segments, of which hopefully are on your screen at the moment. But one is talking about salvation, one is talking about how that works out, and then the next one is how that fulfills the promises of Israel, and then the last one is how that faith unites everybody. Or they're the rough gists of it. And we're in that second one about how does this work out? We know that Jesus is the dude, but how does the rest of this work out? And we have this description and this outworking of a new humanity being described because of the Christian faith. A new humanity, a new kingdom on earth. Now, Paul was also writing into a situation which was at the heart of the empire. An empire which approached the world very differently to the way Christianity did. When you look at the number of people Rome had to kill to obtain its power and authority, then you're looking about 8 million people through various different wars and the gladiatorial rings and all sorts of different things, which is a huge percentage of their population at the time. And then you look at the empire of Christianity, if you like, the kingdom. 1 person died. People have, of course, died throughout Christian history, but to establish the authority and the power of that kingdom, 1 versus the 8 million of the kingdom that Paul was writing to. And Romans 6 gives us some either-or choices. This, do you keep on sinning so that grace might increase? Now, this passage is not, I believe, not meant to make us feel guilty. Instead, it's meant to free us. So instead of going, oh, you call yourself a new Christian and you call yourself a Christian and you're doing those bad things, naughty person. No. I don't think that's what this is about. This is about identity. How do we identify ourselves with this new kingdom, this new humanity that Paul is writing to us? Some of my favourite phrases with Paul is that there's no longer Jew nor Gentile, slave or free, man or woman. This beautiful image that actually all the things that you think are important aren't. And there's a different measure and there's a different way of looking at things. So when you look at Rome and you see this injustice in the way they use their military, and you see injustice in their class systems, in their political systems, in the way they use their money, in the way that slavery is embedded within its culture. There is injustice of so many different types. And Paul is writing about a kingdom which is founded on justice instead of injustice. And he's saying that it's not about whether you're Roman or whether you're Jewish. And Paul was a Roman citizen who was very proud of his Jewish heritage, but he's going, those aren't the important things. It's the justice of the new kingdom are the things that we're looking for. And equality between people, between nationalities, between races. Freedom from the love of money and an equal and just use of power. These are revolutionary things that Paul is writing about this new kingdom and this new humanity. But if you affiliate yourself to a kingdom and say, you know what, that's my people, that's my land, that's my thing, you're affiliating yourself to those values as well. So Paul's going almost out by outlining it in the context of how he's writing is, if you affiliate yourself to Rome, then you are taking on the identity of the way they use power and class and military and slavery and politics. If you affiliate yourself to the Jewish tradition and the Jewish history, then you're affiliating yourself to the law, to abiding all the law, and if you've broken one of the law, you break all the law. And depending how you identify yourself, there's going to be flaws in that if it's not the actual kingdom that Jesus was trying to build. So, what does it mean to be part of this new kingdom? Well, the freedom bit that I was mentioning comes from knowing that that's where our identity is that it's in the thing that Jesus has built, not in the power that we try to gain. And our admission into this kingdom is through baptism. And baptism is a sign of saying, actually, I'm going to die to these other kingdoms. I'm going to die to these empires, to the way that they do things, to the way that I want to do things. I'm going to die to that so that I might have life again. Because death and resurrection are some of the key principles in Christian living. Death to self, death to our things that we want, death to the way that the empire might want things. But not just death, that resurrection life. Because actually in Romans we hear about this life that comes through Jesus, that we might share in the resurrection life that Jesus has. And that is phenomenal life. So we die. And we don't identify and cling on to that empire way of looking at things. We choose to identify and align ourselves differently, not bound or stuck. Last week we had the passage from the beginning of Romans 6. Where it said, do you keep on sinning so that grace might increase? It's about where do you identify? Yes, you believe in grace, but are you going to keep on living in these old ways because you live in grace as well? Or are you just going to, stick to the kingdom? Are you going to identify with those things and follow those things through? Because after you die to those things, you are born again into life of that new humanity, and we are united in that faith and in that love that Jesus has. So how do we, coming back to our decision making that we were faced with at the beginning, how do we as Christians try and make decisions? Well, I think there's 2 steps. First, you die. What are the things I want? Well, you know what? I'm going to sideline those. I'm going to put those things down. What are the things that culture wants? What are the things that society wants? You know what? I'm going to sideline those things and put those things down. And they're not going to be the things that control me. Instead, I'm going to look towards the faith, towards the love and unity that Jesus is seeking to build in the church. And in that life, we live and we can help make those decisions. So what about for you, individually? What decisions are you facing at the moment? And some of us, maybe they're simple decisions, but for some of us, we are facing really difficult decisions. So many people facing unemployment at the moment. Are you conflicted with whether you're going to publicly take a stand on things? Well, how do we do things? Well, we reject the injustice of the current systems. We die to it and we live. We live for justice. And it's not just individuals who need to do this. We need to do this as a community. We need to die to injustice and we need to commit ourselves to justice. And not just commit, but actually have passion for. I love the bit that Reverend Mary said last week when she was talking about Jeremiah and had it burning within the bones. That's what we need. That life, that justice burning from within us, from within our bones, so that we might grow and share that kingdom of God. Not justice in our own image. Because first, we die. We die to ourselves. We die to those other things that pull on us. And second, we live in the life that God has for us. Because we are not defined or held back by one thing. We are not our job. We are not our money. We are not our politics. We are not our successes and we are not our failures. And we're not our nationality. We can be proud of the journey God has called us through and the cultures we have belonged to, but they are not the controlling things on us. Because firstly, we die. and but then we live. We live for justice. So, how are we to be known? What is our identity in the kingdom going to look like? Well, I hope our identity will be one that people see as people who die and people who live. And we live for God's justice. Amen.